The New England Patriots have had quite the offseason, right? And I think there was a lot of hope going into this offseason and a lot of speculative kind of conservatism going into it as well. They fired Gerard Mayo after 1 year. It did not work. They needed more mustard on that sandwich. They do like what they have with Drake Maye, a guy who I was a very big fan of coming out in the 2024 draft, and they drafted him at 3 overall, and I think he performed very well given the situation last year. Terrible offensive line, very confusing coaching staff as far as their decisions last year. And again, the receiving room was just not there last year either. The rookies that they drafted didn't perform. The vets that they had were kind of mid. So what do we have going into 2025 with Drake Maye? Well, we have a new head coach with Mike Vrabel, the former Tennessee Titans head coach, who we saw get to the playoffs multiple times with rosters that we just never saw coming, with Ryan Tannehill and beat up offensive lines and Derrick Henry and defenses that kind of always seem to just kind of squeak out wins when they could. Vrabel did some very. I think Vrabel is a culture builder, but not only that, a guy who understands the X's and O's and can connect with the players because he is a former player. He's kind of like the mixture of a player's coach, but also a bit of Belichick. And I think that combination makes him able to connect with players very well, very much like Dan Campbell up in Detroit. And I like what we're seeing as far as the staff that he's brought in. I mean, I have some skepticism, right? Josh McDaniels. I have some skepticism to Josh McDaniels. I understand he performed very well the first year with Mac Jones and most of the years with Tom Brady. Everywhere else he's ever been, though, he really hasn't been able to kind of keep it together. Granted, that's as a head coach, not as an OC. So there is some hope that he walks in here and he's able to mold the offense around what works for Drake Maye. I understand that his offense has been considered kind of complicated over the years, but he can also kind of tone it down and has been able to do that for rookie QBs and for QBs that just happen to be there who need to start. So I am hopeful at this moment. I like the fact they brought in Doug Marrone, stolen from Alabama, former Jacksonville head coach. That's why I thought they were going to sign Cam Robinson in free agency, and we'll touch on that in a moment as to what I was hoping they would do this offseason and what ended up happening, because I think those are two very different things. The DC they brought in was Terrell Williams, who's been with Vrabel since he was down in Tennessee and then spent a little bit of time up in Detroit, and now he's back with him and as the DC now, not just a D-line coach. But Vrabel often has his hands in the defensive side of the room anyway, so I'm not as concerned about who is the defensive play caller as of this moment. I think that could be malleable going forward. But let's look at how we thought this offseason would go, because I thought going into this offseason, I think the Patriots had one mission, right? Fix some of these weaknesses. Make one of these weaknesses a strength if you can, right? Build up the offensive line, fill out the receiving room with some star talent, and it really hasn't played out that way. And it's not to say that that's the team's fault. Sometimes things just fall a certain way. At least as far as the receiving room, I don't blame them for, because there really wasn't a lot of star talent available, and the few bits of star talent that were possibly out there made their decisions to go to other places. DK Metcalf made it known he did not want to go to the Patriots and instead wanted to go to someplace like the Steelers, I guess. Either way, it just never ended up being a thing where he ended up at the Patriots. That would have been a good combination for Drake Maye. Chris Godwin, they went after in free agency, a guy coming off an injury, and they were like, listen, we don't care you broke your ankle. We still want you. And he went back to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, so they had no shot at him. T. Higgins, franchise tagged. A lot of dudes who just never made it off their teams as far as free agent receivers. They did sign Stephon Diggs in free agency. That's an option. It's a maneuver, I guess. Dude in his 30s coming off an ACL. He got kind of a role last year when he was with the Texans. Didn't have to be the star guy. Did start to kind of show up after Nico Collins went down for a little bit with an injury and then tore his ACL. So, where is he going to be going into the season? It sounds like they expect him to play week 1. I am not super bullish on Stephon Diggs rekindling his old self or having very good chemistry with Drake Maye, but at least it's an option in that receiving room because it doesn't seem like there was a lot of other options going into this offseason as far as free agent receivers. It doesn't sound like Amari Cooper signed anywhere, will sign anywhere. Maybe he's into retirement mode. I have no idea. Throw up this, guys, put Amari Cooper in a milk carton, please, and find him, and just let me know he's okay, is basically what I'm saying. They did draft Kyle Williams in the 3rd round to address the receiving issue. I thought that was a smart move. I liked his tape a little bit. A 3rd round shot on a receiver after spending a 2nd round pick last year in Jalen Polk, who I was not as big of a fan of. I thought there were guys in that draft that I would have taken over Jalen Polk. I digress. We are where we are at this moment in time. They do have Pop Douglas. He's shown pretty well as a role player for that team, but I think on most teams he would be a high-end, 3, a low 2. He's not like a true number 2. He's kind of a role player. He fits a very certain role on that offense, and they could scheme stuff up around him. I'm sure he will be an important part of that offense, but I don't think he can't be your star is what I'm saying. You look at the rest of that room. Kendrick Bourne, Kayshon Boutte. They brought in Mac Hollins because he's friends with Josh McDaniels and knows the offense. And Kendrick Bourne knows the offense too, which I think is going to be helpful as far as getting Drake Maye acclimated because he's already had time with Drake Maye. It's why I think Kendrick Bourne stays on the roster going into this year. I might have been a little bit more skeptical about it maybe earlier in free agency, but as I've kind of looked over the details and where they're at, I kind of think Kendrick Bourne's their best shot of at least having a functional offense. I don't know, Kayshon Boutte might be on the roster, but maybe he's the one who sticks around. Mac Hollins, there's been a lot of talk about maybe Jalen Polk doesn't even stick around for a 2nd year as a 2nd-round receiver. And that tells you where everybody feels about Elliott Wolf as far as a GM goes. Javon Baker had some good talk in the offseason. Didn't really show up last year, but at least it's something. You look at some of the other, players that could probably pop up. Again, Efton Chisholm's had a lot of talk. UDFA, who has been making a lot of noise in camp, has gotten a lot of different reps as far as the 1s and the 2s in OTAs. So I think that they like him. There's a lot of opportunity here for Kyle Williams to go ahead and take over a big role early on as a rookie. We'll see if that happens. I think that might take a little bit more time. The good news is, for their pass catchers that are not receivers, they actually have a good room. I like Hunter Henry. I like Austin Hooper. I think they've both shown the ability to be very solid role players in the NFL. They're not star talents, but you put them around a rookie QB or a 2nd-year QB, and again, I think guys who they have chemistry with the quarterback. They've been there for a bit. They've also both have experience in McDaniel's offense. I'm feeling very good about where both these tight ends are as far as how it supports the room because, again, maybe you can run a lot more 12 personnel. And then they drafted Travion Henderson in the 2nd round, running back out of Ohio State, who reminds me a lot of Dalvin Cook and ETN coming out. He also has a little bit of Sony Michel to him when he was coming out. Remember, I'm talking about Sony Michel before the injury. Maybe a lot more speed than what Sony Michel ended up having in the NFL, I think, is what we'll see with Travion Henderson. But I'm saying in that phylum of running back, where it's in that zone of like the 210 dudes that they have that breakaway speed. They just have enough breakaway speed, a little bit of cutting. They can stick it and kind of gut it between the tackles, but they're not big dudes. So you're kind of a little worried. Like they're not 220, 230 guys, but they're able to kind of hit what they can. I kind of like the 210 guys because they'll have those good years. Again, the Dalvin Cooks, Travis Etienne, 4.4 speed, just the ability to kind of break away runs and be able to get those 25, 30-yard runs that are, like doubles and triples in the NFL, what you want in the NFL, and even a home run every once in a while too. So, and the ability to catch out of the backfield, which is something that Travion Henderson can do as well as pass block. Again, very good pass blocker in this draft class. I think he was considered the best one. And that's not to say the rest of that running back room isn't too shabby itself. I know Ramondre Stevenson had kind of a rough year last year, but maybe he kind of resettles, and now we're kind of all settling back into this McDaniels led offense. Maybe he has a little bit better of an identity of where to go going forward. And Antonio Gibson always had fumbling issues. Kind of a decent receiver out of the backfield. Maybe they want to kind of get him back in the game because they kept him around at least for another year. They didn't just cut him at least, which they still can do. And I think that running back room and the tight end room are going to be strengths going into this year. this brings me to the offensive line, right? This was the kind of concern going into the year. Were they going to address it? Can they make this a strength? Which was the thing I was really more interested in, is could they make a weakness a strength? Which sometimes you see with teams where they address offensive line with multiple, darts at the board, with a high draft pick, with free agency. And they did throw a lot of darts at the board, right? Maybe not all the darts we wanted, right? I was saying before, I thought maybe Cam Robinson would have been a good free agency signing. Eventually, he ended up going to the Texans. Apparently, there was some rumors that like Doug Marrone, who had familiarity with him, wasn't entirely sure on the guy's work ethic, and they wanted some incentive-laden part of the deal. I digress. Whatever it is, we don't really know why the deal never came to fruition. Maybe he just didn't want to be in New England, and Texas sounded like a better option anyway. But there are other good pieces to that roster. They brought in Morgan Moses, who was with the Jets and the Ravens, and has had some injury issues in at least last year as far as being able to get through the year healthy. But he played really well for the Jets last year. He played really well for the Ravens, and then prior to that, the Jets. And he's been a very solid right tackle in the NFL. I think you can get another year or two out of him. I think he could be a fine stopgap, and now allows you to solidify that right side with Michael Onwenu, who also could play right tackle, but could also play right guard. In fact, they moved him around so much last year on the offensive line, they basically stuck him as like a matchup offensive lineman, which I've never heard of. It sounds insane, but like Onwenu was a very good O-lineman last year. He was their only good O-lineman, and they said, let's just move you to wherever we need you to. And he's like, I guess we could do that. I've never heard of this before, but he's played all over that offensive line. So Onwenu will probably play wherever they need Onwenu to play. They did draft a tackle in the 4 overall in Will Campbell out of LSU. The one concern with Will Campbell is, not long arms, kind of a slighter frame. He's got, I think, the shortest wingspan, not just like not just arm length, but like wingspan length of all offensive linemen, or at least all tackles. He's had the shortest wingspan. So that's concerning, but I mean, it's just an outlier for a tackle. Again, maybe he doesn't work out at left tackle. We hope he does. I hope he does. I hope for Drake Maye's sake he does. But it's possible that he ends up kicking into guard at some point in the future. But try him at tackle. You need a tackle anyway. And then they'll put Onwenu at right guard. They signed Garrett Bradbury after cutting David Andrews, who also ended up retiring this offseason anyway at center. They also drafted Jared Wilson. They're getting Cole Strange back, which sounds like he's going to be the dog that's kind of leading the fight for left guard. I feel like that's fine. Like, again, that gives you a solid offensive line. I kind of feel like maybe I wanted one more piece, one more dart throw there, one more stronger dart throw anyway at tackle. But again, if Will Campbell shows out, if Onwenu and Moses, I'm pretty fine with. Bradbury, we kind of know what he is as a center, better zone blocking center. When he's had good guards around him and good guard play, he's been okay as a pass blocker. He's had some issues, though, as a pass blocker in the past, up and down years, including last year and a couple of the years prior to that. The year before he was fine, but he's just had some not the best years as a pass blocker. But again, that starting 5, I think, could be solid, and I think what you're really looking for after last year is just get a solid offensive line going. Get something, man. Get something. And I think that's where we're at right now with the Patriots, is that we're at least okay. There's some solid upside to this offensive line room, and maybe they have to address it again next offseason, but you're on the right path. I mean, there were some moves I wanted them to do on the offensive line, right? Like, I wanted them to sign Cam Robinson. I wanted them to maybe go after Trey Smith. Trey Smith was never even an option. He got tagged and then extended. They could have traded for Joe Thuney, right? They were offered the same deal that the Bears got offered, to trade for Joe Thuney for a 4th. They didn't decide to do that. I thought that was a mistake, but maybe they feel much better about Cole Strange in-house. Maybe they worried about the money, the investment into an older guard. But, I mean, like, I felt like Thuney would have been the smart trade because he's familiar with the offense. Don't worry about the young guy you have no commitment to. Worry about the quarterback you want to keep developing and moving forward with. Let Cole Strange compete for a different spot on that roster. Let Onwenu take a different spot. Like, let guys move around and see what you can do, because Onwenu's probably going to play right guard. Strange could play center. I don't know what they plan on doing, but it would have been nice to see maybe an effort to go after Joe Thuney. And again, I like the Morgan Moses signing. That was something I would have done in the offseason when I'm planning out my offseasons going forward. That was one of those moves I was really big on, was them bringing in Morgan Moses. Glad they did it. But we'll see how it plays out. But it does feel like this offense doesn't have a true strength to it, and that's what concerns me. But listen, Rome wasn't built in a day. It's Vrabel's first year with the Patriots. He wanted to be here. They wanted him here. And it seems like everybody's really infatuated with Drake Maye in the building. I think everybody's a big fan of how he played last year, given the situation. So it's just going to be, what steps can you make to, go forward to continue to build around this talent. And again, I don't think they had a lot of options in free agency. I don't think they had a lot of options to build up the offensive line in free agency. They really didn't have a lot of options in the draft as far as receiver goes. I guess there were some options, but it wasn't a great receiver draft. And so it was, are you going to take the guy you think is a really good left tackle, but maybe is an outlier as far as size goes? Or again, like guys like Travis Hunter already went. Some of the top D-line prospects, had already gone. So I think they were kind of concerned about, like, hey, let's just take the best guy we have left on our board. They took Campbell. They liked what he could do. And then they spent a third-round pick on a receiver. Maybe I would have tried going a little bit sooner on guys, or made an effort to get some of the other ones like Higgins, Knoll, guys like that. But Williams and Knoll, I think, were kind of in the same phylum of receiver, where I kind of felt like I can understand where you can make your argument either way for either of those dudes, as far as Jalen Knoll, Kyle Williams, who both went in the third round. It's not like one of those guys went so many spots higher. I'm okay with where they're at, but I would have liked to see more investment in the into this offense. But there's only so much you can do. They took Travion Henderson in the second round. They only had a second-round pick, a third-round pick, and a first-round pick, and we went through them. So they spent it all on offense, so there you go. Like, they did try. They have tried. Now, they did kind of adjust the plan, right? Like, apparently, like, maybe their plan was to go ahead and spend a lot of money on offense, and they just couldn't find the offensive pieces to be there. And then they went, hey, what if we spent a lot of money on defense and took this already pretty good defense, a defense that was really good a couple of years ago, and rebolster it with some reinforcements? And they did. Like, they're going to get Barmore back after the blood clotting issue last year. They signed Curious Tonga, who, again, is a solid rotational nose tackle. And now, what did they do? They went ahead and signed Milton Williams, probably one of the top free agent defensive prospects for D-tackle from the Philadelphia Eagles. Signed him to a massive deal. 4 years, $104 million. They stole him from the Panthers. They're all upset. They were like, we almost had him. We had him. And then the Patriots walked in and they guaranteed him all this money. And just $25 million a year? Really, man? Really? 26? What are you doing here? Competing with everybody. It's like, we're actually competing here. I know. Listen, and this is a good strategy. I like the strategy of, like, listen, sometimes you can't do what you want to do. Sometimes you have to lateral and just take what you can to get really good at. And they said, listen, let's make a strength a super strength. And that also works. Having this D-line rotation of Christian Barmore, Milton Williams, Curious Tonga to go along with fourth-round rookie Joshua Farmer, and then this edge rotation, who, again, not a lot of stars on the edge right here with K'Lavon Chaisson and Harold Landry and Anthony Jennings, but Keon White's been a very good player for them over the last 2 years. So again, a lot of guys who can move all up and down the line and play a lot of different spots and create mismatch issues, which is a big thing that the Patriots have done on defense in the past, and something I think Vrabel can utilize as a very good defensive head coach, player, kind of dude who also is, surrounding himself with a lot of smart people. So you look at that defense, the defensive line looks really good. That's not the end of it, though. They went out and signed Carlton Davis to go along with Christian Gonzalez. I think both those guys are top-end corners. On their best years, they're really, really good. And on their worst years, they're solid, or a lot of times with Carlton Davis, a lot of times when he's not playing well, it's just because he hasn't been on the field. So that's the one concern with Carlton Davis, is just injuries kind of keep him off the field. That is concerning, but now you have a very solid up front mixed with a very solid back end. I like their safety room with Jabril Peppers and Kyle Duggar, and they brought in Marcus Epps, and I think those were good pieces to to have and build around. You could play 3 safeties. You could drop guys in the box. Jabril Peppers has played all over that formation. They also have Jelani Tavai as a guy who can kind of both play linebacker and can drop down and be a little bit of an edge rusher himself. They brought in Robert Spillane as a linebacker, who again gives you another piece to this defense where I feel like there's a lot of good pieces that they spent money on to really build out this defense and really make it hard because, like, listen, they know it's going to be a hard time on offense. They know what they have in Drake Maye, but they can't put all the pieces around him just yet. So give him everything else. Give him the ability to, okay, like, listen, we don't have to rush it. We just, play with what we got. Play with the solid tight ends and the running back room and the role players for the receivers, and we'll try to get there. Maybe utilize Drake Maye's athleticism. Again, Marcus Jones kind of played 50% slot, 50% out wide as far as a corner goes. Throw him in that rotation with Gonzalez and Davis, and you have a defense that could be a shutdown defense, a defense that could probably, shut down a lot of good offenses. I think they have a lot of opportunity here if this all plays out in their favor. Again, you do need health to kind of play out. They have, questions as far as the offensive line goes, but I like this defense. I like that they've at least made efforts to fix the things that are issues in that, offensive line room. I do like that they are addressing it with the mindset of we do care about personality, although Stephon Diggs has had questions as far as, how he's handled character in the past. But, it doesn't seem like any team was ever mad to have him. It just seems like he just didn't really, he did want to move on eventually, and they wanted him to, it just happens. But you look at the receiving room, it's a lot of guys and then an old dude who's coming off an injury. That receiving room I have questions about. That offensive line room we have questions about. That defensive piece, though, I like. So maybe year 2 with Vrabel, maybe they take a chance at maybe getting a wild card spot in a division that, you're seeing maybe the Dolphins going through a slight rebuild, kind of like quasi rebuild, but trying to be competitive. You have the Jets going through a new coaching staff who are missing pieces in different spots and are trying out Justin Fields as a quarterback. There is an opportunity here to fill in a hole in the AFC, and you have a guy who maybe has the opportunity to be one of those alien-style quarterbacks we like to hear about, these high-end quarterbacks, and maybe eventually they do put a piece around Drake Maye. Maybe they trade for Terry McLaurin, who, maybe that contract situation just doesn't work out for the Commanders, and they're willing to offer something to bring in Terry McLaurin, who can match a lot of what Drake Maye does. So, end of the day, I like some things about the Patriots. I think it's kind of like a rebuild year, and like we're retooling and we're seeing what we have for right now, and then they will adjust as things go along. I do have concerns as far as the McDaniels hire goes, because I feel like there are maybe, other options out there, but McDaniels has always adjusted his offense to what he can do, especially for the quarterbacks, especially when he's not the head coach. He seems to have a better time adjusting to what he needs to do. This Patriots team is exciting. I think there's hope for the future. That's the good thing. I think there is hope for the future. I think there's possibility for development for a lot of these guys. We will see. And I wouldn't be shocked to see Elliott Wolf being moved on from there.
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous. About the past, about the future.